Hi, everybody. It's starting to snow. You know what that means. Snowball fight incoming. Got you. Welcome to Fiddlesticks and Stitches. I'm Fiddle. Today's project is a fitted bench and a drop leaf table, but I also added in the walls and floor for this room because of it being fitted. The floor underneath the bench was left out. With that being said, I did not make a pattern for the bench itself because that is going to be determined by the space that you're putting it in. But I did make a pattern for the drop leaf table, and you can find that and the list of materials at the link in the description. The first thing I did for this project was make a pattern for the floor, and I did that by laying out pieces of paper and taping them together until the floor surface was covered. Next was to decide on how big I wanted or how wide I wanted the bench to be. I think I put mine at an inch wide, so I measured out from each side an inch and drew my lines across and cut the pattern out. After that, I traced it onto a piece of cardboard, and this was going to be the base for my floor. Thank you, past me. I pre-cut these bricks a few months ago because I knew I wanted to use them for the kitchen. But this is just sheets of craft foam from Dollar Tree, Elmer's glue, and a little thing of drywall mud, also from Dollar Tree. I mixed up the drywall mud and the glue and then applied it pretty much like peanut butter. I gave it some time to dry and then went over with a wet rag and rubbed it off where it needed to be, and it turned out quite well. I did go over the craft foam with a rock to try to get some texture in it, and it did not work very well, so I think I'm just going to have to go after it with a knife and maybe even some sandpaper, but I'll save that for another day. Let's see how it looks. Not bad. Now on to the bench. For this, it's going to be just about like it was for the kitchen sink. We're going to be doing framework for the start of it and then using slats for the rest of it. To keep my lines straight and to get the size I wanted, I drew lines from corner to corner, and that was going to be my cutoff points for the sections of the bench. To do this, I followed the outside edge of my paper all the way around and making sure that I made the angled cuts as straight as possible. You'll want to make two sets of this shape right here that I'm showing, so that way you have a top and a bottom. Like I said, just like for the sink, it is the framework. You would need to decide on how tall you want your bench to be. I did mine about an inch and a half tall, but I left enough clearance for the top part of the bench as well. I used big popsicle sticks, approximately two for each section, and I made sure to measure over and over again to have my lines where I wanted them because I wanted a little bit of a lip at the edge of the bench. Side note to that, I would have actually used the piece that I had cut from the floor plan, but somehow I had managed to lose it before I started recording, so I did it the old fashioned way. Nevertheless, I was able to get my pieces the size and shape that they needed to be, and after a good sanding, it was time to test fit just to make sure. Same process for both of the other sides of the bench, but I made sure to do the center first because as long as the center was where it should be, the sides should also. So long as they're straight to begin with. I ended up getting mine off track. I think that had to have been while I was building it, but that's okay. I just made a simple measurement and cut a little bit off, and you can't even tell in the end. Then I grabbed some extra popsicle sticks and my handy dandy clampies and clamped it all down and let it dry for a few hours. And then I moved on to the front pieces. These are just popsicle sticks that I did the same way as for the kitchen sink, where I just rounded the edges a little bit and glued them on. And while I'm working on that, I wanted to talk a minute about the elevator because it has been a thorn in my side since I thought of it. And there's lots of different reasons around that, but mainly because there just isn't the room the way I built the house. But my husband came up with a solution for that. We have a project to get back to. I went ahead and after gluing down all of the pieces around the outside,
I taped off what needed to be taped off to protect it and painted the bench piece black. I got a new matte black paint and I really wanted to try it out on the wood to see what it looked like. I think I should have distressed it a little bit after painting it, but that's not to say that I still couldn't take a piece of sandpaper in there and scrub it up a little bit to give it a bit of a more worn look. Overall, I think it fits in well with the theme of the house, and it dried pretty quick and only took one coat. I almost forgot the trim on the underside. Now we are moving on to the table itself, so you'll need to grab your patterns. We are going to be starting with the legs, so we're going to need a square dowel and this piece of the pattern, and you're going to just cut it out with a pair of scissors or an X-Acto knife and trace it onto a square dowel. 4 times, one for each side of the peg of the table. I guess that would make these feet then, wouldn't it? Okay, well, I guess we're working on the feet then. Anywho, after getting them cut to the right length, I went ahead and used my knife, carved them out. Then I used a nail file to shape them out. I didn't go too curvy on them. I kept them pretty square. I just knocked the edges off. I noticed that I didn't put on there where to attach the feet of the table. I wanted the overall size to be 3 inches. Thankfully, you don't have to worry about that. You just have to make sure that you line up the bottom of the flat portion of the foot with the bottom of your peg. I used my super glue first and then came back with wood glue. Okay, and then you have a table. No, I'm kidding. This is after. Okay, now back to our regular scheduled program. This happened because I didn't realize that I wasn't recording when I finished building the table. I didn't have to want to go through completely remaking it, so I'm just going to show you how I did it with a few pieces of scrap. I'm using the same thickness wood for each piece, and I will reference the colors on our patterns. The first 3 pieces that we need is the thin side of the table and the 2 square dowels that are gray. Fold your pattern in half for this, so that way you can figure out where center is. Mark it on your wood, and this is where you'll put gray dowel number 2. Set those aside to dry, and we're going to grab a square dowel, green and blue, along with 1 hinge. Grab your green square dowel and your hinge. Place it just at the top of your dowel, opposite end of the feet. And I applied them just like we did in the little pantry that tried. First by marking where we want the hinge to go, the holes for the hinge, and then we take it off, poke the holes with something sharp, scuff up the hinge with sandpaper, and use something like E6000 to glue in your hinge nails. And I use my plier handle to mash them down into the holes that I made with the pokey tool. Next, we need to attach the blue square dowel to the hinge using the same process as before, where we draw, poke, and glue the hinge in place. You should have something that look and functions like this. Let it dry and it's time to glue it to the base. Remember that mark that I said to put on the center? This is where you're going to use that along with the thin side of the table. Be sure as you're gluing that you leave clearance for the swing out arm to hide under the thick side of the table, so the thin side can be folded down. Grab your last 2 hinges because we're ready to put these 2 pieces together. For this, you're going to want to make sure that they are lined up where they're supposed to be, and mark out, as we always have before, where your holes are going to take your pokey tool and poke the holes. Use an E6000 type glue to attach them. And with that, it brings us to the end of our project. I'm sorry about the finicky end. Hopefully that will happen less and less. And I really hope you enjoyed this project. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.